If you've watched our video on ancient Greece, then you probably remember the huge effect the Empire of Macedon had on the conquest of Persia, Greece's eternal rival. None of that could have been done if Alexander the Great hadn't been born at the right time. Welcome to History Simplified, and today we'll be presenting you with our analysis on Alexander the Great and the Empire of Macedon. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn notifications on for more videos like this one. Without further ado, let's begin. Alexander the Great was an ancient Macedonian ruler and one of history's greatest military minds. As king of both Macedonia and Persia, he erected the largest empire the ancient world had ever seen. So, let's begin with a backstory of Macedonia. Before the 4th century before Christ, Macedonia was a minuscule kingdom outside of the main area dominated by the city-states of Athens, Sparta, and Thebes. During the reign of King Philip II, which was roughly from 359 to 336 before Christ, Macedonia managed to subjugate mainland Greece and the Thracian-Odrysian kingdom by employing diplomacy. In fact, Alexander himself played a big part in this, and we'll explain to you why. Alexander the Great was born in 356 BCE at Pella, in Macedonia, of course. Alexander was the son of Philip II and Olympias, and he was taught by none other than Aristotle himself. Aristotle inspired Alexander to learn philosophy, medicine, and also scientific investigation. However, Alexander himself managed to teach Aristotle a couple things or two, mainly smashing the belief that non-Greeks should be treated as slaves. Even at the young age of 13, he was smart beyond his years. So he was left in charge of Macedonia during 340, the time when Philip attacked Byzantium. Alexander proceeded to single-handedly defeat the Maadi, a Thracian group that threatened to seize control over Macedonia. He also commanded the left wing at the Battle of Chaeronea, where he managed to defeat the allied Greek states and even broke the sacred band of Thebes, a feat thought to be impossible for someone like him. Just for added context, the sacred band of Thebes was a caste of select soldiers, 150 pairs of male lovers that formed the elite force of Thebes, making for a total of 300 soldiers so strong that only that number was able to defeat the Spartan domination. And remembering how Sparta's specialty was military, that means the sacred band of Thebes wasn't a force to be trifled with. However, even these guys ended up being annihilated by Philip II of Macedon during the Battle of Chaeronea back in 338 BC. Alexander was known to be a visionary from a young age. He had a very well-developed skill to plan, dream, and strategize on a large scale, which also allowed him to win many battles. Even when he was outnumbered, Alexander's enemies would feel intimidated just because they were facing him in battle. It also helped motivate his men and raise their morale, which in turn made it easier to win for them. On top of that, he had an inspiring and courageous personality. He was wholly devoted to training his men and rewarding them with honors and spoils, even going into battle beside them, which increased their devotion and confidence. Since Alexander was young and empathetic, he had a huge influence over his soldiers and subjects. However, despite his accomplishments on the battlefield, Alexander wasn't able to win absolute respect over all his subjects. That's why some people close to him still conspired against Alexander, and even prompted some of the people closest to him to be murdered. Philip was one of Alexander's greatest influences, watching him win every year victory after victory, and also learned how he remodeled the Macedonian army from citizen warriors into a professional organization. Even if he had suffered great wounds in battle, like a broken shoulder, a lost eye, or even a crippled leg, Alexander would imitate this behavior as a commander too. The reason why he did this, as recorded by Cambridge University professor Paul Cartledge in his book Alexander the Great, was because he wanted to outdo his father. Alexander wanted to challenge his superiority and authority, and ancient records indicate that the two of them became estranged in Alexander's teenage years due to this. Later on, Alexander's father Philip divorced Olympias. There was a quarrel and a feast that was held to celebrate Philip's new marriage, prompting Alexander and his mother to flee to Epirus. Alexander's relationship with Philip was quite strained, and historians believe that he also resented his father's multiple marriages and the children that were born from them, considering them a threat to his own position. Alexander traveled the world, eventually visiting Illyria for a couple years. Afterward, both him and Philip reconciled, and Alexander returned to Macedonia, but his position as heir was unclear now. To make matters worse, Philip II was assassinated in 336 BC while celebrating the wedding of Cleopatra. No, not that Cleopatra, that's the subject for another video. We're talking about Alexander's sisters, and turns out that the one who killed Philip II turned out to be one of his former male lovers, a man named Pausanias. There are many wild theories about why Pausanias killed Philip II, with some historians even mentioning Alexander and his mother as part of those plots. The truth is that nothing is clear to this day, except for one thing. Philip had been planning to invade Persia, though he never turned that into reality himself. Olympias cemented that feeling into Alexander, fostering in him a dynastic ambition, and telling him that it was his destiny to invade and seize control of Persia. Alexander proceeded to execute the princes of Lyncestis, who was presumed to be behind Philip's murder, along with all his possible rivals and the faction that opposed him. Alexander proceeded to march south, recovered Thessaly, and then, during the assembly of the Greek League of Corinth, he was appointed as general of the invasion of Asia, which had already been planned by Philip. Once he returned to Macedonia by way of Delphi, he had proceeded into Thrace in spring of 335, and then proceeded to crush all the tribes as he made his way through the continent. He forced the Shipka Pass and destroyed the Triboli, a Thracian people who were left devastated and then were conquered by the nearby Illyrians. He crossed the Danube to disperse the Getae, turning west, and then crushed a coalition of Illyrians who had invaded Macedonia by way of Delphi. In fact, the Pythian priestess had proclaimed him as invincible when he passed by. After the campaigns in both Thrace and the Balkans, Alexander proceeded to attack Thebes, a city in Greece that had risen up in rebellion. In December 335 BC, the Battle of Thebes took place immediately outside of and in the city proper. Although Alexander did not desire to destroy Thebes, after sending several embassies requesting their submission on what he had considered merciful terms, he eventually decided to destroy the city as an example to others, razing it completely. With that, both Greece and the Balkans had been pacified. Now, Alexander was ready to initiate a campaign against the Persian Empire, which would turn Philip's dream into reality. It's said that when Alexander was at war against the Persians, he had employed the Persian invasions of Greece in the 5th century BC as a way to justify his attacks. In a spin of absolute irony, however, Alexander fought many Greek mercenaries while he was campaigning against King Darius III of Persia. And even more so, Sparta, a city that had lost its king, also opposed Alexander, even seeking Persian help to overthrow him. It seems like everyone wanted a piece of Alexander's head. Despite the opposition from the Spartans, Alexander had been successful against Persia, winning the Battle of Granicus in 334 BC, back in modern-day western Turkey and not very far from the ancient city of Troy. It's said that Alexander had defeated a force of no fewer than 20,000 Persian horsemen and an equal number of foot soldiers, then proceeded to advance down the coast of West Turkey and annihilate cities as he passed by. In spring 334, he crossed the Dardanelles, leaving Antipater, who had already for several years served King Philip, as his deputy in Europe with over 13,000 men, and himself commanded around 30,000 foot and 5,000 cavalry. The young conqueror proceeded to seize control of Western Asia Minor in winter of 334 to 333, overcoming the hill tribes of Lycia and Pisidia. And then in 333, he had advanced along the coastal road to Perga and past the cliffs of Mount Climax. Fortune was on Alexander's favor as Memnon, the powerful Greek commander of the Persian fleet, died suddenly and allowed him to push through Cappadocia and the Cilician gates. Alexander then kept conquering city to city, marching into Syria and Phoenicia, looking to isolate the Persian fleet from its bases and to finally smash it with his forces. Parmenio, Alexander's second in command, managed to secure Damascus and Darius's war chest, while the Phoenician cities of Marathus and Aradus came over quietly. Darius sent him a letter offering peace, and Alexander reminded him of the historic wrongs of Greece and demanded surrender to himself as Lord of Asia. Alexander then took Byblos and Sidon, collecting more and more cities like they were kids' toys or dolls. Meanwhile, the Persians were cornered, but didn't stay put while Alexander took control over half the world. They managed to counteract by land in Asia Minor, though they were soundly defeated anyway. Alexander arrived at Tyre, and he was denied entry into the island city, so they had to engage in a siege. King Darius took this time to offer paying a ransom of 10,000 talents for his family and cede his lands west of the Euphrates. "I would accept," Parmenio is reported to have said, "were I Alexander." And Alexander replied to him, "I too, were I Parmenio." Tyre was stormed in July of 332, and the city was also razed, with the women and children being sold to slavery. In November of the same year, he reached Egypt, and he was warmly welcomed by the Egyptians, eventually founding the city of Alexandria near the western arm of the Nile. According to legend, Alexander killed Darius's chariot driver and almost captured the Persian king before he fled once again on horseback. Days later, with Alexander's cavalry in hot pursuit, Darius was killed by his own cousin, who delivered the fallen king's head to Alexander as a tribute. He proceeded to invade India and defeated King Porus's armies there, though he was impressed by the Indian king and proceeded to reinstate him and win his loyalty and forgiveness. He was injured by Mali warriors along the way, and though he had recovered, many of his army fell to illness and death while they were in the Persian Gulf. After capturing Prince Oxyartes, Alexander married the prince's daughter Roxana in Iran. He at last reached the city of Susa, and to recruit more soldiers, he attempted to create a ruling class by connecting Persian nobles to Macedonians. However, the Macedonians were angered that Alexander had taken upon the Persians' customs, and he was forced to kill 13 Persian military leaders at the Thanksgiving feast in Susa, causing even more strife among the two cultures. While he was a gifted conqueror, managing to create a massive empire at just 32, Alexander was only human. He died of malaria in Babylon on June 13, 323 before Christ, just a couple months before his son was born. And sadly, his empire crumbled under its own weight with time, with each nation in it battling each other for power and thus reinstating the cycle of war once more. So, what are your thoughts on Alexander the Great and his creation of the incredible rise as one of the greatest emperors of all time? Let us know in the comments below. And now that you're here, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and to turn notifications on for more videos like this one. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time for more.